Hi everyone, welcome back to ArchiTalker. Today on this episode, we seek to explore what a practice really is, practicing architecture in Africa. And we have architect Adeyemo Shokunbi. We're going to roll on to this real quick. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being
you
here. And, we did try as much as we possibly could to make this happen.
Yes.
It's been going on for some time now, but now we're here. So
Finally here.
And
we're so happy to have you here.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here because I believe this is a platform that is making a difference.
Absolutely.
In the space.
Absolutely.
So well done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So for my first question to you.
Yes.
What really does it feel like to practice architecture in Nigeria? What's the day-to-day practice like of architecture and in Africa at large?
Oh, okay. Obviously, I'm always going to say that I deal with the context. So I will probably answer the question based on what it's like to, work as an architect in Nigeria or practice architecture in Nigeria.
Right.
My day-to-day really is quite simple. It's like an act of juggling three balls or even sometimes many balls at the same time. You have to obviously, as architects, deal with the creative side of things.
Yeah.
You have to solve problems and you have to make, in my case, that is, and that entails going to sites, trying to ensure that, whatever it is that you're working on, that everybody's on the same page as you are. But with all these things come the challenges that we face, the challenges are many, but I think over time you learn how to
maneuver your way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But to give a typical example of how my day goes, it's come to the studio. It depends on what stage of the project we're at.
Right.
Say for example, if we are on site, then there might be cases where you just go straight to site, in the beginning of the day. But on a typical day when things are not happening on site or there's no project that we're actually executing at that time, come to the studio, catch up on what everybody's doing, go through the list of projects that we're working on at the time, see how, we're keeping to the time that has been set for each project in terms of deliverables and then if there are sites to visit, then you do a site visit. I think what we do in our practice is that, like I gave some kind of indication earlier, is that we make what we design.
Right.
So there's a lot of hands-on that goes with what we do. But when we're going the traditional procurement route where we're having contractors on site, and if there are meetings that need to be set up or, that need to be sort of managed, there's that. But like I said, within the context of all this, there are lots of challenges that we face.
Right.
The environment is a little bit difficult.
Right. Talking about challenges, you mentioned coming to, the studio to, handle design and all that if you're not on site. What are some of the challenges that you face translating design into reality?
Oh, God. The challenges at this point in time where, the economical climate in Nigeria is quite tough. I think it's about budget more importantly than anything. The challenges always evolve around money. Right. And it's about the management of money or the financial aspect of the projects that we're working on. And because things are very volatile, things are not stable. So it's about management, and you have to really be on top of your game where, nothing is left to chance. You have to find ways within, how you operate to ensure that everybody's on top of their game. I mean, the person who's actually working in the studio, the person who's working on site, and myself in terms of how I relate with the clients. Because, we work in an environment where we're dealing with a lot of money on behalf of a client, and we're helping clients to manage their expectations. And if you leave things to chance, you might get burnt. So we don't learn these things in schools of architecture, obviously, but the fact that one has been doing this for some time has enabled one to understand the importance and how to deal with that.
Throwing more light on that, how then do you manage the balance of creativity with the demands of the project management and the client expectations as well? How do you put all these three together?
So, when I first started out as an architect, I mean, to just take it back to that, it was more of like the sole practitioner where you were like busy doing everything by yourself. But with the way things have gone now, I mean, we've been doing this for a very long time. We run a practice where there are people who handle different aspects of, the process. You have people who are managing clients, even though clients like to relate with the creative director or whoever is actually the main practitioner. But what I've actually done over time is that I know what I'm good at and I know what my weak points are. So all the areas where I believe other people can handle them much better than I do, I delegate. Yes. Right. So it doesn't now become like a difficult thing. And within the context of all that, we try to make sure that, there are meetings that are scheduled to sort of like keep abreast of every single step, so that we're not caught off guard, so that's how we manage that, but still, I mean, things still do go wrong, because we're human and sometimes
you can get it all right.
No, you can't get it all right because there's sometimes there are things that are beyond your control.
Exactly.
But the thing that we try to do, more importantly, because of things that we've learned over time, is to make sure that the client's expectations are very well managed and they're met. Yes, but most important that we find the responsibility that is on us to ensure that we don't mess up.
Right. Okay. So what you spoke about collaboration and that was in-house in the architecture firm. I think we have the understanding that once you hire an architect, you hire a whole team also that mostly is not known to the client. So then how does collaboration with other professionals like engineers, contractors, lead to the success of an architectural project?
So, I mentioned earlier that we tend to design and make our projects as opposed to the old traditional way of designing and then going the traditional way of engaging a contractor and all that kind of stuff. But, within what it is that we do, we still engage subcontractors. But the way that we collaborate has always been because we tend to work with people that we've been working with. Engineers that we work with are people that we work with or we've collaborated for a very long time. So we understand, we understand what our expectations are and how to manage them. Clients obviously sometimes might be new clients, that have come either from referrals or maybe they've seen something that we've done. But I think as an architect, personally, the way it works for me is that I always try to give everybody the opportunity to prove themselves and respect what it is that they bring to the table.
Right.
And that helps to sort of like develop a level of trust you know, and we've had moments where you're looking down on the ideas that someone is contributing to a situation, and you find out that in the long run it doesn't sort of like help the side. But I think it's just really recognizing that everybody has something that they have to offer, and it has to be obviously discussed, and but most importantly, give the people that you're collaborating with the opportunity to prove themselves because of what they bring to the table.
Can you have a successful architectural project without a structural engineer, a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer? Can you ever have a successful project without these engineers?
Well, it depends on the scale of the project. If we're talking about something that is a small scale house, for example, and because it's something that one has done day in, day out, or year in, year out, I think one can actually carry out a successful project without using some of those professionals. But what I will say is that when we're looking at a project that is of a scale that requires the input of these allied professionals, and you don't use them, surely it will be a failure. So you definitely need to sort of like work with a team of allied professionals who bring something to the table, and who will come with their expertise, and it also helps to allow you to focus on what you're good at as an architect, and that is to manage the design team. Obviously, by managing the design team, it helps to sort of like give a level of credibility to the design or the concept that you're trying to bring to life.
Let's talk about technology. How has technology transformed architectural practice in recent years?
Right. So when we talk about the architecture practice, or the practice of architecture and technology, and we look at it from the studio point of view, and we look at the advent of, when I started out, we were using drawing tables, right? Now you have a computer as a tool. And over time, there have been giant leaps, in technology when it comes to how, these tools are utilized. Computing, the software that comes, the apps that allow you to sort of like go into a space where you can easily measure a room using your phone.
Everything has been made easier now.
Yes, everything's been made easier, but I always put it down to the fact that garbage in, garbage out. So if the person who is making use of this technology is not well equipped from a level of experience or understanding, all those tools will not serve any purpose. Absolutely.
Of designs.
Absolutely. That is the key. Because, if those are not, it's like how I look at the way that the trend in architecture now, not trend, but the way architecture is going on the continent now is that we're beginning to look a little bit more inwardly, because we need to identify or give ourselves a level of an identity that speaks to where we're from, the region that we're from. We need to sort of like look at how, when you look at the architecture that is being produced in Nigeria, or in the southwest of Nigeria that we're in, it speaks to the traditions and the culture. Even if technology has allowed or enabled you to sort of like improve on it, maybe it's about the turnaround of being able to bring it to life. The time obviously is now reduced because of technology, but nonetheless, I think we should not let technology overrun the fact that we have a history to preserve, and we have obviously we can still consider looking forward. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we want to also understand, for the young ones coming up, what are the pitfalls in the architectural practice that we need to be aware of, and then sort of work around to make sure we do better?
So young ones that are coming up tend to want to run before they can walk. And they're not patient enough to sort of like take on. I remember when I started out as an architect, I was very lucky because when I looked at what my colleagues who we were all doing our year out, this was back in the day in the UK, they were like working in studios where they were concentrating on a certain aspect of, some kind of detail of toilets, iron on the schedule, things like that. That was what they were working on when I was doing my year out. I happened to have been given an opportunity to run project from start to finish. Yes. So I felt like, oh, this is what it's all about, right? But one of the things that I think I was very lucky to have been given was an opportunity to do that. And the pitfalls or the challenges that young architects are facing today is that they're not given those opportunities early enough for them to develop, how to be an architect that is somewhat well experienced in certain aspects of the profession. And because young ones have been sort of like deemed as cad monkeys, that all we expect of them is just do
high proficiency.
Yes, and they themselves think that that's the only thing that they need to learn how to do. But the truth is, and I always say this to young ones that I meet, is like, I know times are difficult and people need to survive, and I say to them that there are times that you're probably going to have to work for nothing. I don't encourage it, don't get me wrong, but you have to just know that you have to learn the tricks of the trade. And in some cases, you probably might have to do that pro bono, because you have to think of the bigger picture, and that is that, okay, you know what, there are possibilities and there's potential for me to learn and soak in all this information, and once you've actually been able to be exposed to all the tricks of the trade, so to speak, it helps to eliminate some of what the pitfalls are. And the pitfalls are, in some studios, for example, the young ones are probably never given the opportunity to sort of sit down with clients to
know what the real problems could be when practicing.
Or not even that. It's like given an opportunity to sit down with a client, it gives you an understanding that, whatever the solution to whatever the design problems are, you can actually speak to the client and get it firsthand, and it encourages a level of communication development, which is very key in this profession, because you have to listen. You have to listen, and then you have to respond. And listening helps articulate your level of communication as well, So the things that I would say are the pitfalls that young ones need to try to avoid are, just knowing that it takes time to get to the stage that they probably think they can get to in 2 seconds. Just be patient, right?
Right. And then in having that patience, you end up producing quality work.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So now that you have acquired all this, grown in the profession, and then in your quest to produce quality work out there, as an architect, how then do you sort of ensure that your work maintains that quality and then integrity amidst commercial operations?
Right. I think, one of the things about doing things over and over again is becomes second nature. So I'm lucky that I've been given opportunities. Some people that have been in the game as long as I have may not have been blessed with some of those kind of opportunities that I've had. I've had clients that, I've been doing work repeatedly for a very long time. And every project that one has done over that period of time that we've been working for a particular client, I could see the level of evolution in terms of quality, in terms of the design, language, because as architects we evolve over time, right? And the things that you take on and you look back at and think, was I the one who did that? So time improves everything, really. And the experiences and the opportunities that we've had enabled me to sort of like at first hand be able to solve problems without struggling, because I've had the opportunity to do them over and over again. And because of that, I have to take it upon myself to at least try as much as possible to stay relevant, where you don't try and rest on your laurels because you've been doing things over and over again and you think that's it, you don't need to learn anything new. So I've tried to improve, as architects, as we all know, we have to do continual practice development. And it's just trying to just stay abreast of what is happening, right, at any given time, right? And also trying to find ways to incorporate that into the practice of architecture.
So I think what I really want you to touch on is maintaining the quality and knowing that there's a budget that you have to work with. The client is giving you some pressures. The design is sort of getting expensive and all that. How do you manage that?
That's a good question, because if I'm being honest, God, it's one of the reasons why I'm a broke architect. I'm not. I'm just joking. No, but what I mean by being broke is that, whenever I gave a word to a client about delivering on a project and I have sold the idea to that client, I try as much as possible. It doesn't make good business sense, but I try as much as possible to make sure I deliver on it, even if it means that I have to,
Contribute to it?
Yeah. It's obviously a very silly way to approach things. But it is what I have done, because when I look at what I do as an architect, I look at it that it's an investment for the next project. And that there are things that I might want to add to a project that if I haven't been able to identify it, and I know that thing will make a huge difference, I don't mind investing my time and my money that is over and above what the budget stipulates. But I don't necessarily encourage this, because one of the problems that I had was I never studied the business of architecture when I was younger. And now that it is becoming an important aspect, and don't forget, when you run a studio or you run a practice, you have other people that are dependent on you. And I have to meet their expectations or their requirements. So maintaining a level of understanding and being able to, I told you earlier about winning the trust of your client, right? And maintaining it, actually, not just winning it, maintaining it, because obviously for them to approach you to carry out or to collaborate on a project with you, it's because they trust you to a certain extent. And I always say that trust starts at 100%, and you start to deplete it over time. Sometimes you can obviously maintain it, but if there are things that you're not doing and you're kind of like creating some type of misunderstanding, that leads to trust diminishing. But nonetheless, to answer the question, budgets are set, budgets need to be maintained, and obviously based on experience, it affords the opportunity to sort of manage that as best as you can. I also try and do things whereby all things are identified from the offset. When you start out, and once those are identified, and if a client comes to you and says, "Oh, you need to change this," you look at what that does to the integrity of the project, because you do not want to reduce that. You have to manage that. I always say that it is always the project integrity that needs to be maintained throughout the life of the project.
No compromise.
No compromise.
No compromise. Great. We're talking about sustainability now. How important is it in architecture? How important is environmental responsibility in architecture now across Africa?
Well, it is something that can't be underestimated. It is extremely important. Sustainability, obviously, is a word that is thrown around, but I think it needs to be understood. What are you sustaining? Are you sustaining a project over a period of time, or are you sustaining it based on the materiality? Are you sustaining it based on what it does to the environment? Are you sustaining it on so many different things? So the sustainability needs to sort of like really be understood, that which compartment of sustainability do you want to dwell in? And then you now start to sort of like, apply it. But most importantly, at this point in our history where the environment is being affected quite badly, especially in the global south, we need to learn from how bad they've actually, sorry, not global south, I want to say global north, that in the global south, we now need to be mindful that whatever we do to the environment now is going to tell on our future generations. So therefore, we need to handle it with the utmost level of responsibility. For every project that one does, you have to have a checklist. And like I said, which category of sustainability are you trying to adopt for that particular project? And always know that the materiality is important. Are you going to be using material that can be sourced locally so that you're not adding to the carbon footprint by how things are moved around? Even the materiality, what are the materials that you're using? What impact do they have on the environment? So what are the responsibilities of you as an architect that are being applied to every project that you work on?
Okay. That's great. Obviously, to achieve the sustainability and be environmentally responsible, there's sort of skill set that you need to have as an architect. What skills beyond design are crucial for a successful architectural project?
What skills? Project management. Project management. Because if something isn't managed as best as it ought to, there will be challenges, and it could actually lead to a catastrophic outcome. We've had cases of clients and architects falling out because, that aspect of things were not managed well with that collaboration. So the skills really is to be able to listen as well. Communication. You can come up with the best design or the best concept, and if you hadn't listened carefully to the client in coming out with that, you would have just created a great design that doesn't serve the client. Do you know what I'm saying? Because as architects, everybody's trying to prove a point. You might run with an idea, have not listened very well to the client, and come up with something that's great, but it wouldn't serve the client as best as it ought to. And then, if you don't manage your resources, the time especially, because time can never be remanufactured, or manufactured. So, and you only have but 24 hours in a day, So it's about knowing how to program, every aspect of what you're doing, especially when you're working on a project, in order to make sure that it is a success. And when you're managing that type of resource, you also have to think about the human resource as well, because they can be, they're called in will, but they can be, what makes or breaks the situation if the human resource isn't managed quite well. So it's like management of time, management of human resource, and management of budget. We talked about budget earlier, but if you're not able to manage the budget, maybe there have been instances where I haven't, and I've had to put my money into it, but it's not sustainable to do that. That's another area of sustainability that needs to be
Great.
massaged into shape.
Yeah. Does budget, skill management, and all that, how do you also manage client-architect relationship? You've already spoken about the fact that you need to listen. That's obviously one. Going deeper into it, or really, how do you manage your clients as an architect?
There's a psychology of that interaction that needs to be mastered, and the psychology is that the clients have engaged you because they trust what it is that you can do, and it's not to mismanage that trust. And over time, what I found is that I build on that trust, and I build on their expectations, whereby I try and put myself in their position or put myself in their place, so that if someone were to do this to me, how would I feel? And if I am thinking about how they would be feeling if I did the wrong thing, and the wrong thing boils down to two things: the time and budget. Most importantly, yes, there's expectation of quality of work, but time and budget are the two things that can really make you have challenges with the client. Because if a client is expecting to have a project delivered by a certain period, maybe they've had to go and borrow money from somewhere, and you are now not managing whatever the makeup of that project is. Yes, whatever they are, and it is affecting cost, it is affecting time. It's going to be a really terrible relationship between you and the client.
That's true. So how about clients who have champagne taste, but then have a beer budget? How do you deal with that? A client wants this huge, amazing, rich quality building that has.
That's how all the clients that I've actually worked with are like. But what I have found is that if I try to be as responsible as a professional as I possibly can be, and it is not satisfying the client's expectations, it is best to just walk away from it. After trying to come to some kind of common ground, if they're not seeing it, because how can you, I always say this like that. Whenever a client asks me to work on a project, the very first question that I like to ask, but in this part of the world, they don't like telling me what it is, because they're thinking that you're measuring their pocket or something, right? So you have to befriend them in such a way that they will just tell you everything that they need to tell you. And that's why I say the psychology of how you manage clients is something that needs to be very well developed. I tell the young architects that work with me that, listen, it's not about you just sitting in the office and coming up with, some kind of concept based on whatever the brief is. I think you need to interact with the client. You need to have that face-to-face interaction. And the reason why that is that if the client tells them something, it resonates, in their mind, and it enables them to think along the lines of how they ought to think, But going back, because I think I've digressed somewhat, but going back to the question about how do you deal with the client that has a champagne taste and has a beer budget, it is always the case. But it's always good to, what I do know is that when I try to stick to whatever the budget of that project entails, what happens if the client walks away, if they can't? Or if they don't want to, it's not that they can't afford it, but they probably don't want to spend that money.
How did you walk away peacefully in wisdom?
How do you walk away? I haven't walked away yet, so I don't think I can answer that question. I haven't walked away yet. I tell you who walks away. It's most often the client that walks away. I've given them a budget for the project. You know, it's interesting because you give them a project, they love it, and then you now give them the budget. You know, the cost of the project, and then they say, "That's too much," and they want you to start cutting it back. And you're saying, "Well, I can't," you know, because if I do this, it's going to affect the design. And most times they don't want the design to be affected by, you know, because I don't know, for whatever reason, they just think that you're overpricing something. But it is what it is, you know, so it becomes a problem. And it somewhat forces you to now say to yourself that maybe you just have to be an architect developer. So you just do everything for yourself, you know. And if you're going to do that, then it means that whatever your product is what you now sell. And what I found is that clients will pay anything for something tangible, you know, most times. Obviously, they will negotiate and all that. But it seems that they'll rather pay for something tangible. They won't pay for your services, but they'll pay you for something that they can feel. The same client that will refuse to pay you your fees of a certain amount is the same client that is very happy and willing to spend all the money in the world on a bathtub because they want to show it off to their friends, you know?
Yeah. In that sense, would you say architecture has become elitist, or is always been for the elite? And has architecture ever been accessible?
Well, architects have made it inaccessible. And the way why do I say that? I say it because I was in University of Lagos yesterday, and the project that I went to, they're working on the project. I went to sort of like
Critique?
no, I wasn't actually critiquing it, but I was, you know, just helping them to sort of like navigate their way. And they're working in a very rundown part of Lagos, where they are meant to design something that is, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't find in an environment like that. And I was like saying to them that as part of the research that you were doing into the context and understanding the environment, because they gave me this impression that, you know, the place was a shanty town, and you know, I said, would you stay in one of the units that you went to inspect, you know? And they all said no. And what really what made me ask that question is what you're saying about our architects, elitists, or is it like
Has it been accessible?
and yeah, because we do not give ourselves that opportunity to go into places like this to offer our services. It is, you know, someone from an environment like that will come and knock on our door and say, "Oh, please, I want you to come and do this." And you first of all look at it like it won't enable me to sort of like showcase my design flair, because everybody thinks that it's only when you work for a very deep pocket client that, you know, your design flair. But if you're solving problems in environments like that, I think that is like the biggest contribution that any architect do to society.
And if you're contributing in that part, how then do you also make money for yourself as an
So,
architect also?
good question. I've always seen myself as a Robin Hood architect. I work for the rich in some instances, and I will now take all that and, you know, provide my services to the poor. And I want to design the same kind of concept or same kind of architecture that I would design for a deep pocket client, for someone that, you know, we can collaborate, whereby you can encourage them to sort of like be part of the people that actually execute the build, you know? And I think that's a responsibility that every architect should actually see, that they they have to contribute to the community. You know, you're not just an architect to serve the rich.
Wow.
No.
And, I mean, even in working for whether the lowly or the highly, would you say architects are underpaid? Are they undervalued?
Oh yeah, we are. When you're working for clients like that, we are definitely paid. Because if you're working for a community that requires your contribution to make their lives better, I don't think you're underpaid for that.
Wow.
But you all have a responsibility. However, when you're working for a client who only sees the finished product and what it will cost him to achieve that finished product, irrespective of the fact that you're going to engage an architect to do it, and you don't think that the architect deserves to be paid something that is worth their while. You know, because every time you give a client your scale of fees, they always say, no, it's too much, I can get a young student to do it for me.
Would you, based on this conversation, would you say that the high NS undervalue architects and then the low NS value architects?
Well, I wouldn't even talk about the earning capacity that determines who values.
I mean, let's just say the rich and the poor.
Well, yeah.
Who values architects the most?
I think everybody does.
Really?
Yeah, everybody does. I think there are rich people that do not value, you know, the business of architecture based on what architects believe they ought to be paid.
Right.
You know, there are very wealthy people that would not. I mean, I have architects who, or I know of architects who would never work for a certain type of people that are wealthy. I mean, you know, across the city now, you have all these developers who come and say they want to put up a building. And if you give them your fees, they will be looking at you, are you okay? You know, because they're thinking that cost has to be absolute minimum, you know, for them to achieve a high return on investment. And fees is something that would mess up the numbers for them.
Yeah.
So they never value, you know, what architects should be paid. They don't appreciate it.
I'm so fun, the educated ones, right?
Yes, most of them. Most of them, and that's why I said architects should just become developers and then just be selling the product.
I see.
Because of the culture.
Yeah.
People don't like paying for services, but they'll pay for product. So if you're an architect,
I make the product and then you sell it.
Yeah, you just need to just wisen up. Because the people that are doing all these developments don't have two heads. It's probably that they know how to facilitate how to get money out of financial institutions to finance a project. And what it is like, if as an architect you're an architect worth your, you know, what it is that you do, team up, collaborate with other like-minded, put up a product that is well designed, well articulated, and sell it. Rather than selling a service.
Great. On your side, and then for the client side, what's the riskiest decision that you've ever taken as an architect?
Every job that we take on is a risk. And what do I mean by that? Because you don't know how it's going to turn out, especially in this environment. There have been projects that you would start that will start on a very good note, you know, or good foot, right? Everything is going pretty well. And then it gets to a stage, everybody just goes quiet. That's the risk. So, you know, every project that you take on is a risk.
Right.
So, but when you want to now measure the risk, which I guess what the question is, I can't think of any project. I've just been very fortunate that I can't put my finger on any project that I would look at and say, I took a risk on that.
The mosque.
That wasn't a risk. First of all, the mosque, Abidjan Mosque, right, was a project that we had been made, or we were commissioned, or we were engaged to work on that project. Maybe like about 8 years before it was executed. And when the project was first, or when we got to the stage where it was actually going to be realized, the scope of the project was more than what it was when they eventually said, go ahead and execute it. You know, they had taken a story building and made it into a bungalow and said that's what we should execute. But there was no risk in that. But
I I say that because there was a part where I think there was a cantilever that the client wasn't ready to take up cost for, and then you decided.
So that wasn't a risk. That was actually just because, I'm a Muslim and I have a responsibility to the religion that, everybody has their own responsibility. But I just saw it that it was a way of me giving back,
Right.
and it was a way of me doing what was required of me. And I offered to add a story. I told you that it was a story building and then it became a bungalow. But the building that the client decided to go with, that they had asked us to execute, wasn't going to be adequate for the community. So I just thought, it's a no-brainer for me to do what I thought I could afford to do at the time. Right? I thought I could afford it because in the end, I actually had to go out and reach out to people to contribute money towards me completing the project. Because after I had given my word that don't worry, I would put my money into adding a story, just the medicine, but obviously it made the whole building higher than it was originally meant to be. But it wasn't a risk. It was something that I was very
One of the contribution to the project.
It was a contribution, so yeah, that wasn't a risk. But what's actually quite interesting about that was that when I decided to do that, it meant that I had some artistic license that allowed me to build the mosque as it ended up coming out. And it was one of the most successful projects that we've done today.
All right. So in all this, I believe there's an ethos which you run with. There are some ethical principles that you move with. What are the ethical considerations that should guide our daily practice as architects, especially in a resource-limited environment?
I think it's also about one's values. What are one's values? What are your core values? And you have to bring those to the fore at all times. And it has to be what guides you. And you also need to just understand that what you are doing is going to have an impact on not just the person who has facilitated the project, but everybody that interacts with it visually, who actually walks by it. So when you're considering all those factors, and it would ensure that you stay grounded. Do you understand? You stay grounded and you uphold, the expectations by society, community, and the people that you have engaged to collaborate with. Because if you're not mindful of all the important things that are meant to guide us in what we do as architects, then you're definitely in the wrong profession. Then you're not someone that should put your name or you should author anything that society is going to interact with. I don't know if that answers the question, but
yes. That's to a certain extent. But
no, seriously, if there's anything that you were expecting, if you want to sort of like...
What ethics do you run with in practicing?
I see, I'm a professional.
That's it.
I'm a professional. And I am bound by the ethics that are stipulated in the code of conduct of me being an architect, a chartered architect, And I can never for 1 second sort of like not uphold them. I can't let anything sway me from being professional. Nothing. Right. There are times that people would want to sort of like undermine your level of professionalism. We live in an environment where people are just going to come at you from different angles that sometimes you want to lose your rap.
It provokes you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But like most things, you have to just stay calm and remember that there are the ethics that guide you as a professional.
Yeah. Great. It's been an amazing conversation.
It has, yes.
I'm loving it so far. I'm going to take your last words. What advice would you give to young coming architects?
I have a lot of advice for them.
Summarize.
No, I have a lot of advice because, you see, I look at life like this, that I started out as a child, I became a young teenager, then I became an adult, and me wanting to be an architect started when I was in secondary school. I remember very vividly the day that I actually thought to those words, I want to be an architect. You know, I was very good in art. I was like, for my set, my year, I was like the best art student. I had an A1 in art.
Okay.
So I'm very proud that, you know, I was formidable. But nonetheless, I decided I wanted to be an architect because, you know, the understanding that we had then was that as an artist you would be hungry. We didn't know that architects are the ones who are actually the ones that stay hungry.
Yeah.
You know, but the advice that I have for young ones is that when I said that young ones or the young architects need to be very patient. They need to learn how to walk, actually crawl, walk before they can run. And their time is going to come. But what actually guides me in being able to stand on the advice that I have for young people is because I know what my responsibilities are as an older architect. And my responsibilities, one of which is the most important one, is I have to invest in the future. So the advice that I always try to give young architects is by interacting with them, showing them. You know, I'm a maker, so I like to show them, you know, the process, how to communicate with self, you know, because what I say to young architects is like, it's not about having an idea and jumping onto a computer and trying to download to a computer, because a computer is a tool. But you need to communicate with yourself. You need to be able to converse. You know, your hands help you sort of like bring out what's in your thoughts and represent it on paper. And then maybe from there on you go into making a model, a physical grid, as in the basic elements of it, you know? And once you've gone through that kind of process and you've reached the level where you can now say, okay, you know what, let's go and execute what we've conjured, what we've brought to life. Sorry, not brought to life yet, but what you've actually been able to create. Now you want to go make it. But that process is also something that you will never learn in school. You will never learn it in school. It is only when you get into the real world, in the field, that you're going to bring all those tools with you and start to make them happen. But when you want to make that sort of like leap from what you've learned at school to becoming a full-fledged, confident architect, attach yourself to someone that is doing it, that has the experience. Learn from them. Do you understand? Take your time. You know, everybody is trying to be the next big thing because they think that, you know,
Freelancing is the way.
Freelancing, yes, that's exactly it. They always think that freelancing is the way, not realizing that they need to be grounded in a studio, in a practice, you know, where they can learn. And I also say to them that, okay, even if you want to freelance and you don't want to go work in a studio, engage an architect that is seasoned. Employ his services. Go to him and say, well, I have this project. Can we collaborate on it? Do you know what I'm saying? But don't just go out and run and try and do things by yourself. You know, yes, you can learn from making mistakes, you know, but don't go that route. Learn from other people's mistakes.
Right. Interesting.
And get onto that ladder where, you know, you're starting to make a difference to society. Because architecture is not about showboating and trying to create some fancy piece of something tangible. It is about understanding the purpose or the function of what it is that you're creating. Who is it serving? And like I said earlier too, it's not really about serving the person who has commissioned you to design something. It is about everybody that's going to interact with that.
Right.
That
Community as a whole.
well, the community, society.
Yeah.
And then what's also important is that, they should try to be a little bit more involved in the grassroots that enable policy to be made and the right policies to be made. Take that as an interest as well. Don't leave it in the so-called capable hands of, or the hands of people that are not capable of doing these things. Try and be part of it. Every aspect of what it is that makes a difference in society is what you should try and be part of.
Right.
Not just becoming an architect and jumping onto a computer and then churning out something that doesn't fit in.
Thank you.
And then no. One important thing is that our context is key. When I started out as an architect, because I studied architecture outside of Nigeria, the architecture that I was taught was an architecture that was foreign to Nigeria, because I always knew that I would end up coming back to that. So what also happened was, when I got back to Nigeria, I now had to unlearn what I learned in architecture school in the UK and relearn architecture that was suitable for the environment that I'm in. So young architects need to be mindful of the context and design for that. I know they've been inspired by international world architecture, but look around, travel around Nigeria, look at the different types of, the language of architecture that is scattered or dotted across the country. See the one that, is appropriate for you to develop. However, also be mindful that you can only design for the region that you're designing for based on the history, the culture, and the traditions.
Right.
So young people need to take a good handle of these things, and that would really help them to be a fully grounded architect. And lastly, understand material. Understand material by working with material, because that's the only time that you can specify and be innovative, with the architecture that you're doing. I'm not saying that you should still be doing things that were done in the early periods. I'm saying try and see how those were done, understand how they were done, improve on them, and innovate.
You need to evolve.
Yeah. Evolution is key.
Thank you so much, Architect Adeyomi Sokunbi. It was nice having you on the show, and hopefully we hope to have you back.
I'll be back. I don't think I've said all what I have to say, because there's still room for
there's still room for more conversation. Thank you so much.
No, I thank you too. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for contributing to this.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you too.